Helps if I unmute the mic. Helps if I unmute the mic. Good evening. Welcome to Blue Collar Fishing Thursday Night Live. So if you joined us and you didn't have any audio, it's because I forgot to unmute the mic. Technical difficulties. But welcome to Thursday Night Fishing on the Blue Collar Fishing YouTube channel. We have our special guest in the house tonight, a wild man fishing, or Gumpa, whichever you may know him about. How you doing tonight, bub?
Oh, I'm doing good. How about you?
Hanging in there. Trying to deal with this weather we've been given. Like, I wish winter would
All right.
just give it up.
Mother Nature she's that old girlfriend you had that you used to get in fights with, and she'd storm out of the room, slam the door, and then run back in and yell, and another thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good analogy. All right, Gumpo. So it has been a little while since we last did one of these. I think we did one of these with you about 3 years ago.
Yeah, just about. Right about
Three
that.
years
And
ago.
we're still building rods.
You were making custom rods then, right?
Yep.
Yeah. You're not in the custom rod game anymore, right? You gave that up and you're
Not
focusing
for
on the.
sale. Not for sale. I'll build one for myself here and there if I think I need something special or something that I want a particular action on a rod. But with prices and everything, I got out of it for two reasons. One, uh, the VA rated me disabled. 100% disabled. So according to the VA, Social Security would let me make 1,200 bucks a month and not count it as an income. The VA, no. So any money I make, I can't have any type of steady income. And two, about 3 years ago, Luz started releasing rods that had the exact same guide setups and the wing grips, everything I was doing for a price I couldn't get close to. You know, they're selling those rods for like 150 bucks, and that's already finished. That's what it cost me to buy all the stuff
Mhm.
for it. So, you know, there's just no competing with that.
All right. Now we
And
were talking.
it's a very niche business.
Hmm.
The guys that actually want custom rods, they usually pick a builder and they stick with it. Most everybody thinks they want a custom, then they find out what it costs, and no. There are a lot of advantages to it, but you know, most of us I get to play with the guide train. Most of your average rod on the market comes off the shelf. They do a guide per foot of rod. So if it's a 7 foot rod, you'll have seven guides plus the tip. So eight guides more or less. A custom, most of my customs went out here with 10 guides on them. So what that does is reduces line slap against the blank,
Hmm.
a lot more casting distance. So, but it's another one of those hobbies. If you get into it, you better have some deep pockets because you'll find, like any hobby, you'll find yourself, oh, need to make one of these and one of those. And time you get done, you're like, why the hell do I have 50 rods? Yeah.
I put a tweet last week. If one of these end of the world scenarios ever does take me out, like I've lived through 147 times, my biggest fear is that my wife will sell my fishing gear for what I told her I paid for it.
Right. That's an old joke. Fortunately, mine knows how to pay for mine. She's not stupid. She knows I spend money.
Yeah.
I didn't show her the tackle bill this year. Well, most of that, you talk about not throwing crankbaits. On that, I'll throw it. I'll throw a crankbait in a place most people won't. And I know 80% of the time a fish is going to bring it back. 5% of the time I'm going to get it out of there without getting hung up. And the rest of the time I'm going to be retying. I've donated a couple of baits to Lake of the Ozarks, Kentucky Lake, around here. First
I
tournament
donated.
last year,
Look at that.
throwing a lipless, hung a tree right off the bat. Boop. Well, there went that one. But if you ain't throwing them in there, you're not catching
That's true. I got a fishing buddy that says if you ain't getting hung up, there ain't no fish there.
them. Well,
They
they
need
always say
structure.
you got to fish where they live, right? Well, I'll give you an example. Last year, the Big Bass second day, I was up the Glaze Arm. I was way back up the creek. not too far from the weigh-in. And I went down this one side of the bank, and on the other side of the bank, there was a log, big old log tree thing sitting there. And it was probably the best cover on the bank. I watched 5 guys go through there and hit that log. And I went behind him, and I threw I got a shad smoke colored DT10, and I threw that in there, and it was only like 4 feet of water. And come out with a 4-pounder. Wasn't enough to get me a check, but you know. And the only reason I caught that fish and the other 5 guys didn't is because most guys, they go up there, you find a log or cover like that, what you're going to throw in there is a jig, plastic worm, maybe a wacky rig, maybe, you know, something like that. That bass has seen that. What he doesn't see is a DT10 going by. You know, I taught my youngest daughter how to do that, is throw it up in the branches, because you can work a crankbait through brush like you do a plastic worm. You know, because when you're reeling, you're moving a plastic worm and coming through the brush, what do you feel? It hitting the limb, right? Well, that's what that bill does. It hits that limb. Well, the second you hit that limb, stop reeling. It'll float up. And you reel just a little bit. You feel it hit again. And you can actually work a crankbait through brush like you would a plastic worm. Now, you're going to get hung up a lot more occasion. But with a little patience, you can actually do it. I learned to do that around cypress trees fishing in Georgia.
I might give it a try this year.
Well, if you're fishing from the bank,
if
you're fishing from the bank, your casting angle is going to get you hung up a lot, because you're going to try to cast a 45, and you're going to catch that log that's this way, and you're going to catch it here. That's how I usually lose mine casting on bank. So a lot of times what I'll do is, instead of holding my rod tip down like I do on a boat, because I want maximum depth, if I'm fishing shallow, 3 to 5 feet, hold that rod tip up. You can almost burn it like a spinner bank doing that. You know, good glasses. And you can get them, they make them, they're called plug knockers. It's just a big round piece of lead. They sell them in Tackle Warehouse. You can make it yourself with a snap on it, about an ounce, 2-ounce piece of lead. And you can slide it down a line and just jiggle it. Now, occasionally, the crankbait and your plug knocker will get hung up and will break off. It happens. But for $3 or $4, a couple bucks if you make your own, you can get those and get a lot of crankbaits. And sometimes if you break them off, they'll float. They'll float up. Now that's when you grab your another crankbait and try to hook it. You know, you're going to lose some. That's just the nature of the game. Just like jig fishing, you know. So if I don't lose half a dozen jigs a year, I'm not throwing it very much, or I'm not throwing it in the right places.
Yeah, like I said, Buddy does say if you don't get hung up, you're not fishing where they live.
No. Well, and what you're betting is, okay, I'm going to throw this crankbait by this tree. You're hoping you don't get hung up, and you're hoping Mr. Bass actually brings it back to you, you know. And I've actually had crankbaits get hung up in, 10 feet or less, I'm probably getting that bait back. If I'm fishing deep, 12, 15 feet or more, maybe. But I've actually had them get stuck, and I'm trying to get it loose, and next thing I know, it's like, hey, wait a minute. He come picked it off the limb for me, But that's just the nature of the game. If you're not losing lures, you're not fishing them.
Yeah.
I know they're expensive. Trust me. The damn Fritz sides went up $1 this year. They're expensive, so I try not to lose those, because that was $100 or so replacements, plus whatever I wanted new. But that's just how the game is played.
Mm-hmm. Well, now how'd you become Gumpa? Is that another word for grandpa?
Yes. My youngest grandson, I've got 4 grandkids from the oldest daughter. And my youngest grandson, when he was 3 or 4, he just turned 9. Anyhow, he has speech apraxia, and that's a speech issue. He had a lot of difficulty forming words, certain words, pronouncing certain sounds. He still does a lot of speech therapy over the years. He's gotten a lot better. He can say grandpa now. But when he was 2, 3, 4 years old, 5 years old, most people couldn't understand it. We were used to how he spoke and how he did. In fact, there for a while, we were teaching him a little bit of sign language so he could make himself understood, because he gets so frustrated because nobody understood him, and he couldn't say grandpa. So he started calling me Gumpa. Gumpa, Gumpa, and it just stuck. So I'm still Gumpa.
That's not a bad way to get a name.
I just switched when I got away. I wanted away from the rod business. Everybody knew me as Gumpa's Honey Hole. AWildman, that's my first initial and my last name. You know. But I'm still Gumpa. But I don't care. You know, I don't care what you call me as long as it isn't Collector Lake.
Oh, all right. So we were talking a little bit before we went live about the Big Bass tour that you're going on. You want to talk a little bit about that for the folks out there?
Yeah, I'm fishing all three of the Midwest Fishing Anglers in Action tournament, Midwest Fishing Tournament. All three of their Big Bass Bash. They have them every year. One in April at Ozarks, one in May at Grand Lake in Oklahoma, and one in October back at Ozarks. And then I think Bass Pro Shops runs the Big Bass Tour. I'm not quite sure on that, but they do a similar format, but they have several events like Chickamauga, Gunnersville. There's 8 or 10, 12 events. So I'll be fishing all three of the Ozark-based Big Bass Bash, and then I'll fish the Gunnersville event for the Big Bass Tour. So I still get a tournament fish without all the pain involved in fishing a normal tournament for me. It sucks getting old. It sucks getting old prematurely.
What are you fishing out of?
My tracker. I've got a Tracker 175 TXW with a 75 horse on it.
That's 75
When I
horses.
bought it 3 years ago, it's a nice little boat. I mean, don't get me wrong. I bought it 3 years ago. I wasn't sure what my back could let me handle as far as messing with a boat by myself, because 95% of the time I'm on the lake by myself. I rarely have anybody in the back. It's usually just me, unless one of the grandkids goes with me. So I wanted a boat I could handle by myself, loading and unloading, without injuring myself worse, you know.
Right.
But
Right.
I'm thinking after this year, I might have to bump up to a 19 foot. So, and it's aluminum. I had the money. I got lucky and everything fell right in place. And I was able to basically pay cash for it, not have a payment. So I walked out of the dealership owning it. And I spent probably, I don't want to say that number, but 2 Helix 10 Gen 3s on it. They're hooked to an Ethernet. I've got an Ultrex iPilot link on the front, 80-pound thrust trolling motor. I run 3 Optima Blue Tops, 1 crank and 2 for the 24-volt trolling motor system. And then if the supply chain ever clears up, I'll get a Mega 360 sometime this year.
Is all the
Right
rod?
now, go ahead.
Is all the rods you're throwing still rods you built?
About half of them. Both my cranking rods, one jig rod, and my jerkbait rod are rods I built. I had a couple others, but I snapped one on a hook set. I must have dinged it somehow or bent it the wrong way, putting it in a locker or something. And I had one about 3 or 4 guides come off, and it's sitting in the garage. I just haven't bothered to fix it yet. But life's been kind of hectic family-wise. So this used to be the rod room. It is now currently a guest bedroom. The youngest daughter had to move back in with us, and so we had to put the guest bedroom where she's staying in this room. So
Tim,
I just,
Jeff, saw you guys come in. Welcome.
hey, there's Tim, Palm Predator. What's going on, guys? So yeah, and I'd sit down and build me a couple. I've got probably 4 or 5 rods and stuff to build them sitting here. It's just the time involved. You know, it takes about a half hour, 45 minutes to bore out a set of grip. If you're dealing with winds, if you're dealing with cork, you can call it an hour because cork's tough as hell. You know, and you got to glue them on and got to wait for that to dry. And you got to line up your guides and your reel seat. And yeah, that was the other thing with custom rods. Most people don't realize I had probably 12 to 16 hours in most of the builds. How do you charge for that? I mean, it's either one set price or do I charge a labor charge like a mechanic would? And then at that point with a labor charge, now it's $500.
Mm-hmm.
Relaxing and painting, those 2 words do not go together, man. You're either painting or you're relaxing. It's like being kind of pregnant.
I can't
Unless
stand
you're, huh?
Oh, I think he's painting.
Oh,
bait.
like actual artwork, not painting walls. Okay. Well, then that probably is relaxing. I don't know. I can't draw a straight line with a ruler now.
Yeah, he's taking up lure painting like Mars Tees did back in then.
Ah, yeah, I did that for a while back in 2012, 14. I painted my own crankbaits, made some jigs, worked some plastic. Of course, my son and my youngest daughter were both fishing at the time, my wife too. So I was losing tackle at an exponential rate.
Yeah, he's going to be on here in 2 weeks.
It's fun, but I got better things to do than because I quit pouring plastics. I figured out with plastics and jigs, I was spending more time pouring baits than it was fishing.
Yeah, I've heard people say that. Like, you think you want to. So listen to a podcast the other day. It's like, oh, I'd like to, get in a bait shop or a bait county or something like that. And it's like, oh, so you don't want to fish anymore because
Right,
you
pretty much.
spend all your. Like, never
Well,
thought
I
about it like that.
spoke to
But
the
yeah,
leader, but if you're not running something like Bass Reefer, I'll bring that up because I am a brand ambassador for them, and I know Greg and Rachel. If you're not running a business, you don't have the ability to pour as much as he does at once.
right.
So I have simple molds. I'm shooting, 2, 3 molds at a crack. It takes a while to make 30. Now you got to switch colors, and next thing you know, it's midnight, and your wife's going, "Why aren't you come to bed yet?" Yeah. But then you start losing stuff while you're fishing. Of course, like I said, the kids and the wife are in the tackle box, so you're losing double that. And then you're like, now you got to replace all that crap. And after a while, it just gets to be a grind. And playing with hot lead isn't fun, and hot plastic. Summertime, it'd be 95, 100 degrees. With the garage door open, and I'm out there, long pants, long sleeve shirts, because I've seen the results of guys that dumped 450-degree hot plastic on. It's not good.
We had this discussion last week. Are they still made out of actual lead, or they just call them lead? 'Cause I can't imagine them making anything that stays in water out of lead anymore.
Well, most of the manufacturers have gone to a bismuth, it's like a tin type thing. There are still lead weights out there, and I actually bought like 28, 1 pound lead bars from a guy in Alabama. A lot of guys that pour their own jigs, they'll collect tire weights and just lead like that. They'll melt it down, and that's a pain in the butt because you got to melt it down, skim the crap off the top, and do it again and a couple more times till you get pure lead. And that stuff, then to pour the pure lead, you're talking 800 degrees easy. It cools pretty quick, but you really don't want a couple drops of that out of your hand. Smarts. But yeah, and lead's just lethal. I mean, you're handling it, you're breathing it, and plastic's even more dangerous. If you're heating plastic in a microwave, you overheat it, you better have some good ventilation. Because one whiff of that chemical in the plastisol in the right concentration, you're going to be dead for wishing
All
you
right.
were.
Well, I remember when I was a kid, and you're older than me, but even when I was a kid, everybody called split shots leads.
Yeah,
And I
because they were.
assumed they were made out of little easy lead. I spent my entire childhood biting down on the stupid things.
Well, yeah.
Only to find out.
Just chomp,
I'm actually probably really smart. Just, you know,
Yeah.
fish and
The
run.
lead poisoning took care of that for you and the beer. But yeah, no, that's what Dad and Grandpa taught you. I didn't know my grandpas, but they were gone long before I was born. My dad, you didn't pull out the pliers and squeeze a split shot shut. You just bit it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff we didn't think about. I mean, asbestos,
Yeah. Excuse me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back out there this year. I've about had enough of being stuck in the house.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm having to change my mindset. I'm having to change my mindset because bass fishing in general is different than chasing specifically big bass.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, what are some of the changes you're making? Let's explain that to me.
well, I'm gonna probably be throwing bigger baits on a lot bigger line because I really don't want to hook into a 7 or 8 pounder and have him take me around the log with 10 pound test on. You might get him, most likely not. I mean, I've never caught an 8 pounder myself. I was in a boat with a guy during a tournament in Georgia when I first started bass fishing who hooked an 8. He thought he was hung up on a stump until it swam.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like a regular 3 pound bass. You're not moving him unless he wants to. So have to run your drag a little lighter than you normally would because if it's too tight, you set that hook, he turns his head and takes off. Snap, it's going. And you're only going to get one shot at him. It's not like he's going to come back. Big bass live different. Once they're 6 pounds or over, they become loners. They have a home area, sometimes 500 yards, a little farther. I can't remember his name. There was a guy in Texas in the 80s and part of the 90s who did a radio transmitter study on big bass. Followed him for years. He was a guide, and he figured out that they pretty much live in the same area. They go to the same bank and run the same 100 yards of bank every night to feed. They go to the same spawning grounds every single year. The trick is figuring out exactly where that is. And he got to the point where he told some guys that you can show me a map of a lake I've never been to, and I can tell you where to catch the bass. He was right. So having to do research on that and see what he did. I've been reading a book called High Percentage Fishing, a Statistical Approach to Improving Catch Rates by Josh Allwine. He's a electrician statistician. I'm a data guy. I want all the data I can get my hands on. I've been studying Lake of Ozarks, and I'm going to be fishing this year, which is going to be we're staying south of where the Gravois Arb is, so I'm going to have that full side lake all the way up the back dam to play with. A little clearer water, a little colder probably, but I know the Grand Glaze from last year, it's going to get a lot of pressure. It's usually dirtier. It warms up a little quicker, but there's a lot of boats down there. I mean, it was a carousel, like going to the fair and riding a horse last year, going down banks, fishing docks. I had one guy. We actually came up with a plan. He was in one boat, I was in the other. We were going opposite directions, fishing docks. So I told him, "You fish that side, I'll fish this side, and then we'll swap." As we passed each other.
Ever had anybody come to you and say can't fish their dock?
I've only experienced it once on Lake Springfield back in the early 2000s when I was still fishing local tournaments. I was a co-angler, and we pulled up there and we were fishing near the dock. We weren't even throwing at the dock. It was just a little off. Dude comes storming down a bank, screaming and hollering, and my partner was like, "Oh boy, here we go." And I told him, "Don't worry about this. I got it." And he come down and he said, "Who told you could fish my dock?" And I looked at him and said, "Who the hell told you could build a dock where I fish?" And he didn't know what to say. I said, "We haven't thrown at your boat. We're not going to. But I tell you this, you own that dock. As long as I'm not standing on top of it, I'm not breaking the law. You don't own the water. You can stand here and scream all you want. I'm still casting up there. And I was casting there before you built this house."
Yeah.
Most anymore, that's considered harassment. They can't do it. And most people, and I've never understood the mentality of people. You buy a lake house, you build a dock. All right, I get it. I don't want anybody bouncing a jig off of my boat either.
Right.
If you're not worried about it, put a lift in. You got that kind of money, put a lift in and take it out of the water. But they're going to fish it. They're going to fish the dock. Well, I let my grandkids swim. Okay, well, it's just like when we were kids. You went down to the pond and went skinny dipping. You took your chances that a cottonmouth wasn't going to bite you somewhere sensitive. The user assumes some risk. And I try not to leave things hung up in docks. And if I'm not sure I'll make that cast, I won't. I'll skip it instead of taking a chance on damage and property, etc. Because I know how I'd feel if somebody hit my brand new glitter rocket with a jig. I'd be hot. Now I got to get the insurance to fix that and this and that. Most guys aren't intentionally trying to hit your stuff. I don't think. I think a lot of them are just trying to do stuff they see on TV, and they haven't done enough practice to be able to do it well. That's why I've been standing out in the driveway on decent days we've had, skipping at a milk crate, 15 inches off the ground, or 15 inches wide, 3 inches off the ground. So when I go to make that cast, I can make it. If I think I'm gonna hit a boat, I'll throw a wacky worm next to a boat.
Right.
Wacky worm.
That's actually just what I was going to say.
If that scratches your paint, it's worse than the cheap paint that's on my tractor. Actually, that's not cheap. That's an automotive finish. It's really.
That's what I was going to say. I throw there's in a tight area or something around somebody's boat or something. I will throw a weightless wacky rig up in there and let it sink. That way, even if I do hit the boat,
yeah,
it ain't ringing that dinner bell. I ain't chipping nobody's paint.
Yeah. But no, I don't run into it too often. Well, most lakes around here don't have docks. And then Clinton, where I normally fish, the marina, you can't fish within 100 feet of the damn docks. Because those are all power boats and yada, yada, yada. Kentucky Lake, most of the marinas you can fish, and most guys are careful. If the slip's full, you work the outside edges and move on. Yeah.
We got one here.
Ozarks, the docks will fill, but there are so many docks. I mean, it's like Grant. There are so many docks. I could probably spend the next 10 years fishing Ozarks and fish every single dock on that. But chasing big bass, only a few of them are going to actually hold a big bass.
We got one here on the river that's a private boat club, and they went as far as they put out no fishing or trespassing buoys halfway in the middle of the river. I'm like, how the hell you trespass on public property?
Somebody needs to get together and take the cord or something and just move that crap.
Well, they called the state and said, especially because it's on the dam part of the river where they dam the river up. Taxpayers built this,
right?
It's public access water, navigable water. You can't put up no trespassing buoys on navigable water. You can't own water.
Well, you can, but it's not. You're not going to have a leg to stand on if somebody takes your cord over.
Right.
So
they called the state and made them take up the buoys.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
we don't want people casting into those boats, and they're like, "That's the risk you ran when you put a boat dock on public water."
Who told you could build a dock where I fish?
You're right.
If you hadn't built that dock there, then fish wouldn't be there, dummy. But yeah, I think here in Illinois, I think the tournament scene's about to disappear completely.
You think so? Why's that?
Yeah. Well, there's been a rule on the book for years and years and years. And nobody's ever enforced it. And what it is it's basically a tax on tournament anglers. And this year they're enforcing it. So you got to pay so much money for a permit. I think it was $25 or $30 for a permit to hold the tournament, which is a tax already. And now they want 10% of the pot. And if you have vendors or anybody sells, they want 10% of all the monies because of the damage that tournament fishermen do. It's not us damaging your ramps and stuff. That's your weekend power boat, the ones that can't back up.
On top of the sales tax.
Yep. So I know several tournaments up north, anglers and action stuff have already moved out of state into Wisconsin, et cetera, Iowa, because of that. I know the PFLs are going on this summer. I won't be participating because I got too much on my calendar right now. But I highly doubt MLF will come back after that. So we're fighting it as best we can. But this state's one of those, man, they decide they want to tax something, they'll tax it.
Well, the state, yeah. I live in Pennsylvania. I understand it.
Sorry. 2 years ago, they raised our trailer fees for the sticker goes on your license plate. They raised that from $18 to $120. And we had a fit, and we've been fighting them. They finally got it. This year, my trailer fee was $36, which is okay, but nobody gave me back the $80-some they overcharged. Yeah. But that only applied to fishing boats. It didn't apply to RVs. It only applied to boats. Well, Yeah, RVs do more damage on the road than my 2,000-pound bass boat.
Yeah. Um, you'll most honestly, I would say you will never see a professional bass tournament here where I live. You never have,
Yeah,
and you probably never will, because of the well, one we have because it's illegal just to catch and release fish even during the spawn. You cannot have a tournament on any water or a bass tournament on any water in Pennsylvania until the bass opener June 10th, I think it is.
yeah,
And even then, I live the closest lake I live by is not counting Lake Erie. I can't. Well, okay, fifth counting Lake Erie, fourth not counting Lake Erie because Lake Erie's four states share it.
yeah,
So fifth counting Lake Erie is the fifth largest body of fresh water in Pennsylvania. 5,000 and something acres. It's got a 20 horsepower limit.
yeah. There's a lot of lakes from here on up, where I live on up, that a lot of guys 25 horsepower limits. Now I know a couple guys that are their cowling says 25 horse, but I guarantee you it's poured out. It runs more like a 50 or a 75 than it does 25.
Oh, we got a 20,
Uh,
not 25, 20. I know a lot of guys who have 25s and make that five look like an O.
yeah,
But
but most lakes I fish, there's no power. There's no power restrictions. Of course, then you get to deal with the jet skiers and the wakeboaters, and most of those people are knuckleheads. We got a lake down here, Lake Egypt. It's a power plant lake. Most of our lakes are. Uh, but the people that run the plant are the ones mostly live around the lake. Down there, they've got a rule: you can't fish within 200 feet of any dock. So most of the tournaments left there. But yeah, we've had bass came here twice. They fished Wren Lake one year, and they fished Lake Decatur like 2014 over Decatur, Illinois. But the problem is, we just don't grow them that big.
that too. We have that
We just
same issue too.
we could, but Illinois hasn't managed their lakes properly since forever. And most of the lakes we fish outside of Wren, Shelbyville, Lake Decatur, and Clinton are state park owned, state park lakes. You know, so I don't know where that money's going, but they get a percentage back from the federal government on the sales tax for fishing stuff to go back into improvements, and you know,
Like, I didn't even catch my PB here. My PB, I only have a 5 pounder because I
yeah,
just haven't bass fished like that. But so I caught it in Tennessee, but here the state record here is 12 pounds. Now that's a heck of a bass. It's bigger than any bass I've ever caught. But for a state record, Tennessee state record is Pennsylvania state record and my PB.
yeah.
So their state
Well,
record's like 17. It's not,
our state record's interesting. The state record's been standing since like 75. It's 13 pounds of change. I can count on one hand the number of 8+ I've seen come out of any of these.
yeah,
Maybe one
exactly.
net in my life. And they're trying to get it changed because the fish that was claiming to be 13 pounds, the guy that turned it in, it was never verified. And he claims he caught it out of a gravel pit up north. It's all private land now, so you can't even get on the pit. In the middle of February, it was the only hole that wasn't iced over. That was 78, 79, I think, actually, not 75. Anyhow, the whole lake would have been iced over that because we were soft under with snow till like the end of April. Well, we found out that just a week or so before, he'd gone to Florida. And most of us have got a pretty good guess that one of them 13 pounders came back here on ice. And he turned it in. It's the state record. And I have never in my life even heard of a 12-pound plus fish coming out of any of these lakes. 10's pushing. I did see an 8 last year come out of Clinton, 8.25 come out of Clinton, but that doesn't shock me. It's one of those lakes where there are a couple there. You're going to find them eventually. But a 10 plus, yeah, you just don't see them. Part of that's management, part of it's the growing season. We got 4.5 months of winter. You know, it's not they're
Yeah,
not eating, but it's they're cold. They're not eating as much.
yeah,
You know,
same. We have, and you probably got colder winters than we do, but we do have. I mean,
there's
we're
no wind
still.
blowing. It's all it's more or less flat ground out here. So till you get in town, there is
Right.
no wind blowing. The girl I used to date from Johnstown, she moved out here for a while after we quit seeing each other, but she moved out here for I don't remember why. Anyhow, she moved out here in November and she called me up, and it's Johnstown, you guys are surrounded by mountains. You don't get the wind. She called me up and said, does this wind ever quit? And I said, no, it just gets warmer. Even in the middle of summer, middle of June, 20, 30 mile an hour windy days are normal. So
What's your
it,
local lake, local public lake?
local public lake, closest one is Clinton. I mean, we got a bunch of little ponds here in town. There's a public lake over here. It used to be called Kaufman. It was a pay lake when I was a kid. Used to have some nice fish in it, but it's going to crap. They don't stock them. But Clinton over there, it's a power plant lake. That's where the nuke plant is. And part of the reason Clinton's so good is for all year long, if they're running the nuke plant discharge to keep the reactor cool, where the discharge comes out and comes down from the northwest there in the lake, that water is anywhere between 65 and 75 degrees all year long. And in the summer, of course, it gets hotter. It'll get up in the upper 90s. But that hot water ends up spreading out through the lake slowly. So if you run up to the north end of the lake, the northeast end, it might like right now that water might be 52 degrees. You go up to the northwest end, the other side where the discharge is, that water might be 68. So power plant lakes are tough. It's like fishing the Ohio River. Yeah. Because the constant warm water screws them up.
Yeah.
It's hard to predict what they're going to do. And one thing I've been trying the last couple of years, last year just didn't go well for me, but I've been going to the colder water sections most of the year. Seems like they act more normal there because first tournament out there is usually between now and like 9th or 10th of April. At the trail I used to fish, the ABA. I think theirs is coming up the next week or so. Well, the warm water section will be open because it's closed off as a waterfowl protection area for most of the winter, for otters, for ducks, and stuff like that. Well, you'll be able to cross under the bridge now because it'll be past March 31st. I guarantee you about 50% of them guys are going to run straight into that warm water. Well, the problem is the fish in the rest of the lake are just starting to pre-spawn. They're just starting to move up off the winter, ledges and stuff to feed up. They haven't even gone to the secondary points yet. It's not that warm. But that warm water, I guarantee those fish have already spawned out because that water is 75 degrees all year long. It can be minus 25 outside with a 30-mile-an-hour wind, and you can get in that water and not freeze. It's like taking a bath. I wouldn't want to eat anything out of there. Bread on glove. Yeah. That in farm country, we got a lot of runoff, a lot of fertilizer runoff, stuff like that. So, but yeah, Clinton's the closest. Shelbyville's the next closest. Shelbyville's renowned for its bass fishing, or not its bass fishing, but its crappie fishing. But I've only been down there once since I was 7. And that was just, I think year before last, I went down there once. It was early in the year and wind was howling and the water was dirty. It's an hour and a half drive just to get to the ramp. So, but I hadn't been there since I was 7 because we were down at the beach that summer and I stepped in a hole and the undertow grabbed me and ended up drowning. So I kind of got something against it. But that's where the BFLs go on down there. And Wren, I've never fished Wren Lake. I think I'm going to get down there this year. But again, that's a good 2-hour drive just to get to the ramp. So if I want to be there at the crack of dawn, I got to get up at like 3 in the morning. I'm thinking how long in the tooth for doing that. Not that I won't. It's just
You got a great lake in Illinois, right? What, Superior?
way up north by Chicago. I'm right smack in the middle of the state. So
Okay.
Chicago's 2.5 hours that way. Kentucky's 2.5 hours south, and Indiana's 45 minutes to the east, and Iowa's about 4 hours to the west. I'm like East Central, but we're almost right smack in the middle of the state.
Kentucky. How far are you from like West Tennessee then?
Honestly, I used to be stationed at Fort Campbell, about 6 hours.
Okay. I know Fort
6 hours to
Campbell well.
Campbell. Yeah, I do too. Spent 3 years there. Man, old Clarksville.
Yep. I used to work in Lebanon, so I drive from where I lived through Clarksville every day.
Yeah, it's a good thing you didn't stop. I was just
Well,
down there last June. That's the first time I've been back in 30 years.
well,
They had
most
the 30th anniversary of Desert Storm reunion. So I went. I finally decided it was time. I went down there. We ran into some old buddies, served with. We had a good old time. I didn't get to stay long though, because that was our last camping trip ever. Because the wife and I just can't do the tent thing anymore. And I don't have the money to buy an RV right now. I don't really have a place to put one either. But
yeah.
we're just past the camping thing, and so a couple of officers I served with like, oh, we're having dinner tonight. You can come on. I would, but I got to leave because I promised my grandkids I'd take them camping tomorrow. So I got a 6 hour drive home so I can pack the truck up and leave it. But like Big Bear Resort where we stay at when we go to Kentucky Lake, that's a 4 hour drive.
Mm-hmm.
That's not bad. Honestly, if I want to fish Kentucky, I could literally drive down. I just have to stay overnight. So I'm not young enough anymore to go down there and leave here at 2 in the morning, get there at 6, and fish till dark, and then drive home.
Yeah, it's everybody's like Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I'm like, well, the post office is. Everything else is in
Yeah,
Tennessee.
yeah. My original barracks they moved and they're gone, the old barracks. But we used to tell people all the time, "What do you guys do for PT?" We run from Tennessee to Kentucky and back. It was only about 4 miles, 5 miles, but we ran from Tennessee to Kentucky and back. But
Yeah, I did. I grew up in Fentress County, Tennessee, so it's about 40-minute drive to Somerset, Kentucky.
yeah,
I grew up on Dell Hollow.
okay. There's the lake on my bucket list, Dale Hollow, Nickajack. I think it's hilarious.
Smallmouth.
I think it's hilarious. My PB smallmouth came out of Kentucky Lake 2 years ago.
My PB came out
3 pounds,
of Dell Hollow. I've
3 pounds
I've
small.
matched it. I've probably matched it up here. There's a lot of smallmouth opportunity in the rivers up here.
Just a
It's
case of
funny is
5 hour
my
energy.
smallmouth and my largemouth are about the same size.
Yeah. I just laugh because I caught it on a spinnerbait. There's Square Table Degenerates podcast.
Welcome. Thanks for coming in.
Just a case of 5 hour energies, dude. I drink enough coffee. A 5 hour energy will send me into orbit. I need that sticker though that said this is probably bourbon. No, I think Tim's got a year on me. He's getting up there. He's going to be an old man here soon.
Tim older than you.
I think he's got a year on me. And if he don't, we'll say he does.
Yeah. He's invited me down to Seminole on his lake house.
He's got 2 years on me. Holy crap. You're about ready for the graveyard, Tim. You're 50, almost 50. You'll be 55 this year. I'll just be 53. So you got 2 years on me.
Better make that Seminole trip a reality before you kick it.
Yeah. Yeah. He's sitting on it. We'll get down there. He's sitting on his porch yelling at kids, "Get off my grass. Take that damn pineapple with you." Sorry, I had to bring the pineapple joke up. Now we derailed the whole thing. But nah, I just don't like driving like that. I mean, running 9 hours to Gunnersville, I need some time to recoup before I fish. It just 2 squash discs, degenerative arthritis, and you're back in. I can't drive straight through anymore. I'm driving to Missouri next couple of weeks, in April. It's about 6 hours, five and change, 4 and change, something like that, where we're going. 2 hours into it, I got to pull over, get out, and walk around for a little bit. That's.
Yeah, when
Yeah,
I
I've been
go
on
home,
a
it's
long time too.
about
But ain't like 30 years ago, and my second oldest sister died. Well, she was murdered. That's what she was. She was killed.
I'm sorry to hear that.
And I flew. It's all right. It's been long enough, But I flew home from Korea. I got to Texas. I got about 5 hours of sleep. Got in my truck in 16 hours. It was a 16-hour drive from Fort Hood to where I live, and I made it in 14. So it tells you I was running 90 average, and I didn't stop very often. I can't pull that crap now. Well, I can once. Worst was married to my first wife. We're stationed at Fort Stewart, Georgia. I was with the 24th Infantry Division, early 90s, and her dad died. I got pulled out of a field problem. We've been in the field for 2 weeks, so I hadn't had much sleep. I got home at 1 in the morning. We were on the road at 3 in the morning. And I drove from the southeast corner of Georgia to the southwest corner of Washington State in 49 hours.
Dang.
I went through Kansas and don't even remember. I think I woke up somewhere in Oregon.
I went through Kansas one time and didn't remember it. But what it was I was on the railroad. We were going through Kansas, and I hit East Kansas somewhere, and I'm looking out, and there's a rolling hill and a little farmhouse and some corn.
Then you got the West Kansas, didn't think you'd moved.
Fell asleep in the truck. I just moved the train for 12 hours. We were highballing, so we were moving. I just moved the train. I got done operating the train, got my 12 hours and then I had to get off the tracks. So I had the field clerk was moving us to the next location where they were going to pull in the hole, which was about 3.5 hours away from where I got off the train. So 12 hours on the train, 3.5 hours in the truck, and then the next day off required. So I've been in the truck about 10 minutes.
Right.
Dead. Woke up 3 hours later, some rolling hills, some corn, little white house. I'm like, what we still doing here? Yeah, what are we still doing here? What do you mean? We're 3 hours away from where we started.
Right.
What?
Yeah, my dad retired from Norfolk and Western.
Oh, did he?
He worked for Norfolk and Western. He got back 46 from World War II. And then I think he went to work for them then or just a year later, and then he retired from Norfolk. Of course, that was back then. That pension wasn't much by the time we hit the 70s.
I worked for a maintenance of way company out of Minnesota.
Yeah.
And but anytime we did any work for them, we had to follow all the union regulations for whatever railroad we were on.
Yeah.
So I was allowed 12 hours on track.
Yeah, my cousin just retired, I think, from NSX. I'm not sure, but he did 30 years with them. So what Tim's saying is, when I come down to Fish Seminole, when we come to visit, I need to bring a whole fruit basket full of pineapples. You're gonna beat me
Just
with
make
one
sure.
of them.
I don't know, Tim. But if any of them are upside down and there's a bowl with somebody's keys in it, I'm probably out.
No, it's been a crazy last couple of years,
hasn't it? Yeah. My mom told me that 40 was the worst. Like when she turned 40, it's just like once I turned 40, everything was just. So she's like, 40 was the worst. Your 30s are over. It's your worst birthday. And I said, yeah, well, I got you beat. She's like, what do you mean? I turned 40 in 2020.
Yeah. I was like 35 when my body said,
Mine too.
Everything's broken.
I actually turned 40 in 2019, but then I went into
Yeah.
2020 at 40.
But
Damn.
and he's saying the Lord because he knows me well enough to know how to do it. But yeah, I
I'm not
wish I
gonna live
was.
that down, Tim. I hope you like pineapples. Everybody's getting you pineapples from here on out, Tim.
We got to get a whole pallet of things together and send to him.
Merry
That
Christmas.
was, one of, that was one of the greatest things that ever happened during the Gulf War. We were out so far that we didn't get mail but every so often. And somebody's dad sent him a case of oranges. And we hadn't had fresh fruit in, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. We all had the craps. Because that was, when you haven't had fresh fruit for 4 or 5 months, and here's a bunch of oranges, you just can't stop yourself. No.
Right. But then your body can't process it. Love them. One comment, and 2 years later, I'm still paying for it.
No, they think with Gulf War beds, besides all the other crap they exposed us to and all the inoculations and stuff, without getting into the politics, one of the problems we have, a lot of Gulf War beds have irritable bowel syndrome, and it's from eating MREs for weeks on end.
Don't doubt it.
And because MREs were designed to get you through until you got your next real meal, not be eaten for 6 weeks straight,
Right.
Yeah, Tim, you're never living that down. Just get over it. You need to become the pineapple king. But yeah, and then last year, just my whole tournament season went. And I think it was 2 parts. Part of it was my body just not being able to take that kind of stress, and I put way too much pressure on myself to do anything, to do well, and it's one of my flaws. But when you deal with post-traumatic stress disorder, putting that kind of stress on yourself tends to blow back up in your face. So, fortunately, I got the wife to help keep me straight. She finally set me down. She said, look, that's why I married her, because she ain't afraid to look me in the eye and tell me, shut up because you're an idiot, So, I said, I took 2 months, 3 months off, 4 months off. I didn't end up going fishing again after May until September. We went to Kentucky ourselves. But I went down there in June, hung out with my buddies. That was a really good thing. Come back and did some stuff with the grandkids. But I just didn't feel like fishing. It was just, I was so frustrated. And then we went to Kentucky, and Kentucky Lake tried to drown me. Day before last, we were there. Weatherman said, okay, we're going to have up to 30-mile-an-hour gusts tomorrow. Like, all right, I've been on Kentucky 30-mile-an-hour winds. No big deal. It's not my tracker. And I went down Jonathan Creek. Well, it was way back in Jonathan Creek. It was really nice and calm back there. And I come back out on the main lake, and that 30-mile-an-hour wind went to 50-mile-an-hour steady. Yeah, that's what I'm doing this year. I'm just fishing. Don't care. I'm just going back to what I do best. Just have fun and let the bass fall where they may, or the chips, as the case may be. But yeah, I come out of there in 50-mile-an-hour steady winds, 3-4 foot rollers. I was the only boat out there other than the barge went by half hours. I speared about 4 waves. I was soaked time I got back. It took me an hour to make what's normally a 15-minute ride. And I'll tell you what, it was white knuckles all the way. That little tractor took it though. But yeah, I try not to do that because that's dangerous. Little boats. But I see guys out there on Kentucky Lake all the time. 9 foot, 10, 12 foot flat bottom jumbo with a 9.9 on it. I'm like, if you mind. Yeah. Between the boat wakes and the wind out here, that's why I've got an Ultrex. Yeah, that's cool. Go ahead.
I see guys do it on the kayaks all the time on YouTube. I'll be watching the videos or whatever, and they're out at sea on these things. I'm like, aren't you scared you're going to hook into like this 180-pound fish and it just, take you to Greenland? What the,
2 years ago, I was coming back. I'd run down past the ferry bridge on Kentucky Lake, where we stay is not too far from the dam. I'd run south, and I was coming back, and thankfully he had a bicycle flag up so you could see. But he was out there in a olive drab kayak fishing ledges in the middle of summer on Kentucky Lake. And June with the boat traffic, a 10, 12 mile an hour wind, you're talking 2-foot chop easy. It's not a smooth ride. You're gonna get beat up. I don't care what you're riding. And he's out there in a kayak, and I'm like, thank God I could see him, because you've got to stick near the channel and the channel markers in Kentucky Lake, because it's Tennessee River. Kentucky's got the local lake here that if you don't know where the channel is, you're going to lose your lower unit because you're going to run aground. Shelbyville was notorious for that. If you don't know where the channel is, you'll run off into that stump field. And, that'll be the end of that lower unit. Yeah, see, Tim, that's one of my major flaws, though. And I've been working on it over the last several years. But I have really, really high expectations for myself. Very high standards. I once had a friend tell me my standards for people in my life are too high. And I said, well, if you think my standards for you are too high, imagine what I have to live up to. And part of that's the military training. But you're right. Like I said, this year, I'm going to do a little YouTube stuff. Just go be me. Quit trying to be what I ain't. You either like me or don't. That's been my attitude my whole life. Anyway, you can still kiss my backside. That's just how I am. That's how I grew up. I grew up poor white trash in a really small town with the wrong name on the wrong side of the tracks. I learned a long time ago not to get much of a crap on other people. You want to have some fun? If you got access to Google, look up Beeman, Illinois. Put it on a screen. The whole town will fit in the screen.
What's it called?
Beement. B-E-M-E-N-T.
B-E-M-E-N-T. Oh, okay.
Population 2,000.
In 2020, it says 1484. I grew up 11 miles. I grew up 11 miles outside of a town with 2,000 people and 3 red lights.
We didn't even have a red light. And the only reason we hit 2,000 was somebody counted a couple of dogs and cats in there, I guarantee it.
The part I grew up in was actually called Clark Range. And they can't even call it a town. It hasn't got the population to be a town. It's a community.
I got a cousin. She lives down in Turtletown, Tennessee. But my mom's parents are from Fallbush, Kentucky, which is coal mining country.
Yeah.
But I'm only about 30 miles from where I grew up. I ended up back here again, like the Godfather, I try to get out, and they keep dragging me back here. But I don't go down there much.
I'm about 900 miles from where I grew up.
So. I've been all over. I left home at 17 and didn't come home again until I was almost 30.
Same.
Been around the world a time or two, and I can find a bathroom, order a beer, and make my face slapped in 2 or 3 languages. Yeah.
Ugh.
But yeah, so this ought to be interesting. Like I said, I really like to go down and win one of these big bass bashes. $100,000 would do a lot for my budget. But like I said, I'm gonna go down there and do what I do best: throw a jig, throw a crankbait, sneak a hand grenade in or something. Hook some wires to a battery, and run down the docks. How'd that happen? I was fishing a little lake up here called Homer Lake, just east of me. Little bitty lake. I was fishing off the little concrete platform, just bank fishing a couple years ago, and damn shot boat went by. And I'm like, really? You couldn't have started on the other side of the lake, you jerks? But so yeah, I think I might put the tracker up for sale at the end of the year. So if anybody wants a 17.5 foot tracker with a 75 Merc on it, 2 Gen 3 helixes that are, networked along with an Ultrex. I may even leave the 360 on it if I can get another one. That's crazy, man. One of the groups I'm in on Facebook. I'm sorry?
I'll ask. I'll see you around. You check with Tim with that app?
No,
Tim is doing um, an app that he's launching here with another
yeah,
person. Get everything outdoors. Get all things outdoors. Got to
yeah.
think it is. So
I sent him an
ask him
email
to
after
send you an email. Yep.
I did. I got him after the last podcast when he was on, but
Maybe there. I think Chris
I got
Summerall was looking for a boat.
because it's got some scratches in the paint. But if somebody take it as is, I'd let it go for 28.5. And it's probably worth 34 minimum, just with the electronics sitting on it. And Tim can tell you, but right now the used boat market is nuts. I saw a 21-year-old Ranger with modern electronics. They want $53,000 for it.
The
I'm like,
used
are you
anything
kidding me?
market is not there now.
Well, I figure if gas prices stay up a little bit, all the people that bought boats during COVID, during the quarantine, and payments are going to start eating at them because they were not going to be able to use it because they can't afford the gas. So I got a feeling within the next year or two, the used boat market's going to crash because people are going to dump a lot of stuff. So, yeah, six one way, half dozen the other. But yeah, the prices are going to come down. Yeah, it is nuts. Like I said, 21-year-old Ranger, and the only thing new about it is modern electronics and maybe a 6 or 7-year-old engine on it. And they want 53 grand. Well, for almost $54,000, I can buy a brand new Nitro, or a Phoenix.
Yeah. Well,
But
the issue is these used are going for these prices because they're the supply chain. There aren't new.
yeah, oh, I know.
Nobody built anything.
I've been trying to get a Mega 360 for 6 months. I wanted it on before I started fishing this year, but it just ain't working. And even if I wanted to upgrade my sonar units, which is why I bought the Gen 3s in the first place, even if I wanted to go to Gen 4s, I couldn't get one
And
right
it's
now to save. You know,
and something to keep in mind down the line is we're having to keep it in mind now, but I'm having everybody tell me, like, if you're buying a new truck or a 2-year-old truck, you don't want anything made between 2020 and 2022 because of the supply chain issues. They were just throwing whatever they had in them just to get them
yeah.
built. Now,
Now my Ram's a 2020 Laramie, but it was used and on the lot when I bought it that summer.
right?
So I got it before it went completely nuts.
So
And it's only got like 20,000 miles on it. I'm not
when
getting
you're
rid of
looking
that.
in 5 or so years, people for used trucks, you want a 2019, not a 2020 or before.
Yep. But yeah, so I don't know. I really want to go up to a 19-foot boat. I just don't know if I want to. I almost got this one the way I want it. It's only taking me 3 years to do it. And that's where I'm kind of dickering right now. Because, I mean, if I sell this one and say I get lucky at one of the bastards and cash a check, it's not like I won't have the money to at least make a heck of a down payment on something.
Well,
Do I
that's a
want the payment? To what I really want, and I can't do it with Tracker or Nitro because I got that no hassle, no haggle crap. What I'm tempted to do is call somebody like Express. Yes, new boats are ridiculous. $84,000. I watched John Cruz video the other day on his Bass Cat. What is that? The Puma STS. That thing is $107,000. That's just nuts. I don't know what freaks me out more than the fact that it's $107,000, or that people are actually paying that. You know,
man.
I just saw that.
I went to a saltwater convention in New Jersey a couple of weeks ago with a buddy, and something to do. It's not my bag. I go surf fishing a couple of times a year with him, and or
I
we'll
don't I don't fish
or he'll,
anywhere anything goes big enough to eat me.
or he'll take out a party barge or something like that, maybe. So I'm sitting there, and there are these people in line, and they're talking about, oh, I traded this boat in for that boat. I got a pretty good deal. I only spent $280 on it. $200,000 for a boat? Well,
Dude,
I
I could
think
pay
we're
off the truck and have money.
yeah. I'm like, I think we're in different tax brackets. You know?
Really?
And you're right, Tim. That was not that big of a boat. I'm looking at the
20,
250, 280. I'm like, I've seen, because the saltwater convention is like a $280,000 boat there, the small one. Like, I've taken boats out on Erie as big as this. You know? I'm like,
yeah.
so
But
I'm looking
yeah,
around. I'm like, where's the bathroom? It's like, oh, the $350,000 model is where the bathroom model cabin starts. Like,
over the rail like everybody else, right?
yeah.
Like on a bass boat, if you're shy, it's the live well. But I'm not shy. I don't care who's looking at me. If you didn't want to see it, you shouldn't look in the first damn place. That's what happens when you grow up in a house with 5 women and 1 bathroom. That's why I pee outside a lot, because I never could get the bathroom. But yeah, it's ridiculous because what I'm really tempted to do, and I don't, is call up an express dealer. I'm tempted to call the factory when I get to that point. If I go express, like I said, Tracker Nitro. Tracker's been a good boat. It's been a real good boat. It does not, Tracker's got that rep and has had it since the late 80s. I've been around. Most of the guys I've fished out of boats out of, most of them were the old 16-foot trackers with a 40 horse. So yeah, that's where all the money is all the what's on it, because that's usually where I get in trouble. And that's the other thing I'm having a problem with now looking at boats is everybody's gone to Lowrance and Garmin, and I don't want either one of them. I want my birds. Yeah, I like my Humminbird. And I know Hummingbird's been a market leader till Garmin came out with Live Scope, and Panoptic now Live Scope. Mega Live's catching up. Humminbird will catch up again. Trust me. Johnson Outdoors is not going to sit on it for very long. They're not going to let.
I think Hummingbird's already coming out with their forward facing.
Yeah, they got Mega Live out, and it's already a lot clearer now. But I'm tempted, like I said, call up the Express factory and just tell them, look, I want a hull and an engine, and that's it. And then I can spend the next couple of years tricking it out the way I want it, without
I don't know with the
pay dealer market. But that's what I think. Yeah, right now would be the first time to try to do that.
With the supply chain issues, they may be like, "That's good. That's all we got."
Because if I get that 360, if I want to, I can go on a couple of my Facebook groups and sell a $1,300 360 for $2,500, and there are guys that will buy it like that.
All right. Well, let's ask that question. Moving to that, what do you think is the biggest change technologically or in bass fishing over the years that you've seen?
Google Earth. Everybody right now, everybody's focused on forward-facing sonar, but if you really, really follow fishing, Panoptics has been around for 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a lot of the same arguments when SideScan came out. Now, see, I was around when flashers were starting to become a thing. And people forget, well, everything was cheaper in the 90s. Well, those of us that lived the 90s, you were 10-year-old, I was in my early 20s. Well, back then, a top-of-the-line Ranger was $30,000. I was an Army sergeant. I made $23,000 a year counting my health insurance benefits, etc. I couldn't afford a $30,000 Ranger. Mm-hmm. And a $30,000 Ranger then is no different than a $60,000 or $70,000 bass boat now if you had to do it through. I did the inflation in it. I did that over Tweetwild about a year or so ago. So I got tired of all these 40 and 30-year-olds, no offense, talking about, well, it was so cheap in the 90s. Well, yeah, it was compared to what I'm paying now, but I wasn't making that kind of money either. It was just as expensive then. It's always been expensive. Everybody, even Rick Clun was priced out of the bass boat market when he was young. It's easy to look back and go, oh, the 70s were great. No, they were not. I lived under Carter. They were not great. Double-digit inflation, triple-digit unemployment. You couldn't get a job. A lot of places closed. So flashers come out back then. First you had the paper graphs, and very few guys could afford those. Well, then the flashers come out. Well, not everybody in the early 90s had a flasher because they were $200 or $300, and that was a lot of money. And these old guys would, You're like old guys that'll, try to bring a gator in the boat for a $5 crankbait. So a $300 flasher. So, and there was the same argument. Well, if he didn't have that flasher, he wouldn't catch them fish. Well, then the 2D LCD screens came out, the grayscales that most of us know now. Well, those came out, liquid crystal displays, and those were $400 and $500. You could get a little cheap Eagle fish ID for $100, but the good Humminbird ones were $400 to $500. What Van Dam and them guys are running. Well, if he didn't have that, he wouldn't catch those. Yeah. Well, the bank beaters could still compete back then, and they still can. Side scan comes along in the early 2000s. What that did was opened up David Fritz style of offshore fishing for everybody, which hurt a lot of guys because those guys, Denny Brower, Fritz, you could specialize. Hank Parker was known for throwing a spinnerbait. Well, you could specialize like that back then because not everybody had that ability. And Fritz offshore was murder. I mean, he won a lot of money fishing offshore, and now it's regular. But what happens is that the technology pulls people off the bank. Well, if you're like me, like throw a buzzbait, a spinnerbait, a jig, crankbait, that's fine. Go chase them fish. Forward facing is no different. Okay, you're looking at it. Well, it takes the skill of it. Actually, if you really watch, except with Jason Christie looking at fish under docks, most of these guys are out chasing suspended fish that we've always known were there, but we had no efficient way to fish for them. Well, if you've ever fished suspended bass, I'm telling you right now, you'll have a better chance catching a mosquito with a pair of chopsticks. Because usually when they're suspended, they're not in a feed and move. And as anglers, forward facing, a lot of these guys don't understand how sonar works. If you think all I do is ride around a lake looking, I can only afford so much gas. I mean, if I'm fishing offshore, I might run around and mark 6 or 8 spots, but so I can have a milk run, but it's not like they turn the forward facing sonar and it goes, there's fish. And I saw an interview with Brandon Pollock a while back. A couple of years ago, they went up and they go up to Champlain and St. Lawrence and all that. Them smallmouth would basically sit right under the trolling motor. You could just drop on them. Now they move. That beam hits them and they move. The bass will adapt. Those bass that are getting pressured now aren't used to pressure. They'll adapt and they'll move. Just like what happens Kentucky Lake. Offshore fishing still works at Kentucky Lake. And it was great there for a while, and everybody was doing the same things. Deep diving cranks, big jig, big worm. Well, you can still catch them doing that. But those fish have gotten smarter. One thing I've noticed fishing Kentucky Lake is used to be you drive over the ledge and you see them on your down scan or your 2D, and you could literally drop the marker, turn around, and start fishing, and they'd stay right there. Now, if you ride all over it now, they move off that ledge. It takes them about 25, 30 minutes to set back up. They're still there, but the fishing pressure has changed how they act. I think the big danger that people brought up, and I don't fully agree with, is the guys that fish for food. Don't have a problem with it. I like crappie and stuff every now and then. That they're going to damage the crappie population. Well, if they're being damaged that much by guys taking stuff onto the skillet, the problem isn't forward-facing sonar; it's management of that water. Or exactly. Or you've got guys taking over the limit that they shouldn't be, and that just comes down to more enforcement. But trust me, those guys with forward-facing, most of the guys I know that run sonar units, half of them have got everything you could want in sonar. 5 graphs, forward face, they still couldn't catch a fish in a barrel because they don't know how to use them. And just because you're looking at him, you know as well as I do, how many times you ever looked at a bass on a bed or just up shallow and try to get him to bite?
Yeah.
Look, these pros, everybody forgets, even on YouTube, these pros, that footage is edited. They don't show you the 4 hours he went without a bite.
Right.
The 2.5 hours he spent trying to convince that bedfish to grab that jig or whatever. Somebody thinks these guys are just turning that live scope on and just catching them left and right. Well, it's like anything. You go to a fresh stock pond, new lake, you throw a plastic worm out there, you're probably going to catch them like crazy. Next week, you won't catch them as fast because they're going to realize what that worm is because they got educated. That's why most of our lakes and bass fishermen really, let's be honest, we catch such a small percentage of the fish that are in a lake. There are more fish in most of these lakes than we think. And if you don't believe me, read the shock reports from your fisheries biologist and your DNR, where you go on a DNR page and they got the list, go down there where they shock the lakes and done the creel studies. Read those, and you'll be shocked at what you find. It's just there's so much pressure. Clinton Lake's like 50, 60 acres. It's not real big. 500 acres, I think. It's not huge. A lot of pressure. A lot of tournaments out there. Crappie and bass tournaments around the same time. Crappie and bass inhabit a lot of the same areas. But I don't think forward facing is going to do as much damage as the naysayers say. I think a lot of it is the attitude of, I can't afford this, so I don't want nobody else to have it.
Yeah.
My favorite guys, take the pro out of pro fishing because they got all that sonar. Well, I hate to tell you this, even if you started a tour with no electronics, the same guys that are catching those bass now will kick your butt with no electronics. Wheeler, Christie, Swindle, you name them. And those guys were catching them before this stuff. They're going to catch them after. Look at Wheeler. He was dominating there for a little bit, and he got slaughtered the other day because he choked at the last minute for whatever reason. But sonar just makes you more efficient. You're drilling holes for oil. All it tells you is, okay, this is an empty hole. I probably don't want to spend a lot of time drilling.
I mean,
yes, exactly.
Not always. I don't know if that's. Me and Chris had this conversation not too long ago. I think personally, for me, this professional has the least amount of distance between skill level of the pro and the guy that can go on the weekend. I know if you could put some of these pros up against a guy that can only go on the weekends, but the lake he goes to every weekend, and that guy that knows that lake every weekend is going to mollywop you.
Yeah, well, if you look up like some of the opens and the BFLs and stuff, 9 times out, and I'm throwing numbers, so don't quote me on these, but I'd say 70% of the time the locals win it, the local good sticks, because there's a lot of sticks out there in the opens. I'm telling you, the opens is not AAA.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to anybody that follows bass, you go to the opens, man, you better be ready to fish, because there's plenty of guys down there that if they had the money would be on the series, and you're fishing their home, and they're going to hammer you. You go to Kentucky Lake, I can't think of any names off the top of my head, but I know a couple of good sticks down there, and you can almost bet in that tournament. It's like going to Ozarks. Dion Hibden's kids is fishing, when he's able to fish the bass because he's not a pro. But Guido and Dion grew up on that lake. If one of the Hibdens is involved, they're probably going to smoke your butt if you're not careful. And John Cox, I can't remember how much money John Cox has won. He still doesn't have a graph on the front of his boat. But the thing is with John Cox, he's a shallow water fisherman. Most of the early elite schedule sets up perfect for him. The only time he really struggles is when they head up north to the smallmouth country.
Right.
But yeah, you go to Florida, Texas, Alabama, Georgia. You get down in there, man, that's shallow water power fishing heavy. And 9 times out of 10, you're shallow enough. If you got your sonar on, you're shooting yourself in the foot. Because you're shallow enough, you're spooking with that ping.
Well, they had Tim, what year was it we met? 2018, right? Fort Loudon, that was 2018. I think it was 2018. So 2018, me and Tim went to the Classic on Fort Loudon because that's a knock.
Right.
Yeah, right. Me and Tim both picked Art Defoe to win that because there's a home field advantage.
Yeah, that was his home lake, basically.
That's the lake he grew up on. And he did win that. We picked him to win that. But I said, if he doesn't win it, I pick out Defoe to win because home field advantage. But if he doesn't win it, I say he finishes in the top 3 easily. And I even picked the guys who would be in the top 3. I said it's going to be KBD, Mike Iaconelli, Jacob Wheeler, Art Defoe. Those are going to be the guys that are going because that's the style of fishing that they have mastered.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's
Yep.
it's a river reservoir system.
Yep. You give me something like Kentucky Lake, Tennessee River system. I started out bass fishing on the Altamaha River in Georgia, which is kind of like Altamaha. I don't have any left, but the Altamaha is like the color of my coffee. It's tannic. So I learned to fish in that tannic, dirty southeast Georgia, northern Florida water. You let me fish like that, like John Cox, up shallow. I may not beat you all the time, but boy, I'll be breathing down your neck. Because that's the way I love to do it, man. I like it when they're up like that. Pull the trolling motor up, get the jig out, go to work. Where I struggled last year is I'm really trying to get better with my electronics, trying to round myself out. I am not a deep water fisherman. And I've learned some ledge fishing tricks fishing down in Kentucky because the first year we went down here in 2012, I went out with a guide. When he realized I could actually fish and knew what I was doing, he gave me a class on ledge fishing. I have yet to forget it. Now, if I could just find a couple of them spots he took me to, because my memory ain't that good. But, yeah, see, like Tim, give me that 2 to 5 foot depth range, 6 foot max all day long. I'll let you can have all the forward facing sonar you want because I know throwing a big jig, I'm going to put fish in the boat. I'm going to put big ones in the boat. I may not get 30 bites, but the ones I do get are way good. And I have to tell that story. I'm going to have to write that for see, 10 foot. Now, see, Clinton Lake is funny because there's some 20 foot stuff out there, but the average depth on Clinton and most of my lakes around me are 15. And then you go to Ozarks where average depth is 80 in most places. There is no shallow water. You move 5 feet off the bank and you're 40 feet of water.
I've caught a couple off of coal angling or just out fishing with a buddy who had a sonar on his boat. I've never owned sonar. I've never owned an electronics at all. Period.
Yeah, I used to have a little bitty Eagle ID on my old John boat I started with, and then I had a 2D grayscale on my little twin troller, my oversized kayak I had. And I decided when I bought the bass boat that I was getting me some good electronics. And most of it is I'm retired. I can go fishing 7 days a week if I want. Wife doesn't give a crap. I'm out of her hair. She knows where I'm at. She knows I'm too broke to pick up women because I've got a fishing addiction. And I don't really drink anymore. I have occasional, short line, big stick. Amen, brother. Give me some 20-pound test and get out the way. Crack them. You don't place set the hook on that, man. You said that you cross your eyeballs. But I told her when I bought this boat, I said I'm going to spend more money on these electronics, and not because I think I got to have the absolute most expensive stuff out there, but I wanted stuff that was going to help me maximize my time. Even though I'm retired, I can fish 7 days a week with my body in the shape it's in. There's only so many days that week I'm going to be able to get out and actually enjoy myself. Because I'm going to go, like I go next week. It's going to be 50 degrees. It's going to be cold. Every joint in my body's going to hurt. It's probably going to be windy, so I'm probably going to be beat up all day. Well, if I go on Friday and fish, I can guarantee you what I'm going to be doing Saturday is nothing but sitting. Because I'm going to have a hard time going from the bedroom to the kitchen to get coffee. And it may be Monday before I can do it again. Or like last year when I got back from that tournament, man, I'm telling you, I handle pain really well. You can see the scars from my skin cancer. I've taken probably 40 stitches in my face without anesthetic because it wears off on me. My body just eats anesthetic for some reason. Anyhow, I'm really good with. I have a high tolerance for pain. When I'm driving home from a tournament and I'm almost bawling from the pain, you can damn well bet it would hurt. It hurt. And it was a good week and a half before I could function at the level I'm functioning right now. So when I go out on the lake, I've got 8-10 hours before my body gives out. And I got to keep in mind, I got to drive 30 miles home, and the last thing we need is me falling asleep behind the wheel or, something happening and me swerving in. I don't want to hurt nobody. I'm okay if I get hurt, but I don't hurt nobody else. Actually, I can't take Motrin. Some of the other stuff I'm on, I'm not allowed to take Motrin and a couple other things. I got to be careful between the blood thinner and aspirin, man. I get a hook in the finger anymore, I'll bleed to death. I carry a lot of medical equipment with me on the boat. But so when I got that 8 or 10 hour day to go fish, Clinton, Shelbyville, Wren, or I go to Kentucky for a week. Now I go to Kentucky for the week. I know it's going to be a year maybe before I get back. So that 4 or 5 days, I'm going to really push my body. And, I'm going to come in on the fourth day. I'm only going to fish half the day because I just can't fish no more. My left knee's going to be the size of a fucking cantaloupe from all the stress on it. My back's going to hurt, and then I got to drive 4 hours home, plus load the boat and everything else. So for me, the electronics, guys say, well, if you got electronics, you don't have the skill. And most of these guys, it irritates me because most of these guys are 20 years younger. Dude, I've been fishing longer than you've been alive. I learned to bass fish when there was no YouTube. There was no anything. You didn't get no Bass University. If you were fortunate if you were part of a bass club and they would share. The guy that taught me to pitch, Mr. J, grumpiest old man you ever met. He worked for, he was a marine mechanic, and his Astro had a hole. Somebody had wrecked it. He pulled it up from the river, fixed the hole in the fiberglass, and that was his bass boat. And he was just a grumpy old SOB. And when he taught me to pitch with a crankbait. So if guys like that would occasionally share things with you, but to figure things out, you got to go out to the pond, the lake, wherever you fished, stand on the bank, and backlash that reel 400 times until you figured out how to set it. Denny Brower caused me to get a hook in my butt. I'm going to write that story for the blog, but I'll give you the short version. I had read an article in Bassmaster. Once a month, you get a magazine. Well, they never really told you. The writers, half the time the writers didn't know what they were talking about. The pros would tell you something like a politician without actually saying it. They didn't want to give away their trade secrets. Well, that was my first introduction before Mr. J taught me to pitch, to pitching and flipping. Well, I'm standing in my John boat. You've been in a flat bottom John boat, standing on the floor, right? I got a 6'6" rod. I'm trying to get my jig into these cattails. And I didn't quite understand the whole pitching and flipping thing. Well, I had about 2 foot of line out, and I went to flip that jig up over my shoulder like that. And I stuck myself right up underneath my wallet with a 5/0 hook. And I got to drive home 20 miles with a stick shift truck. But yeah, we didn't have, the information right now out there is unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
It took me years to learn a lot of stuff that a lot of these young kids could learn in a week. How do you know what wood feels like when the sinker hits? Well, what I would do is I would go to my pontoon or Fort Stewart. I'd stand there on a bank or in my little John boat, and I would intentionally throw that lead weight over a log and pull it, and without looking at it, and pull it till I hit the log. Thump, that feels like wood. Thump, that's a rock. And after a while, you learn. Like here, I do throw tungsten, but most of the lakes here are sand, mud, bottom. Throwing tungsten doesn't do any good. You can't, there's no difference between it and lead. So I just throw tungsten because, there's plenty of crappie fishermen leaving 40 foot of line in the water with flying lead on it. So, but yeah, the electronics are only as good as a person using them. It's like anything. Most of the hate on it is jealousy because people can't afford it. I'm from the school of, if you really want something bad enough, you'll find a way to afford it. If you really want it. I personally, I'd love to see these things half price. So that's more budget for tackle. I don't like paying. I'd love to see these things half price. Same with boats, same with trucks. Well,
any new technology, they're expensive, and then when other people can start making it, competition drives the price down.
Well, go back to cell phones. We'll use that. you're old enough to remember when cell phones first started becoming a big thing. The first ones were out in the mid-'80s. When people had them in it, then the brick phones were rich. I didn't have a cell phone until early 2000s because I couldn't afford one. Didn't see the need for one either because I'd grown up without it.
Right. Now
And
everybody's got one.
Well, everybody's got one. That's what cracks me up. These guys are using their smartphones to complain about basketball. And my theory is I'm from the school of talk all the crap you want, but you got to back it up. If you want to tell me I can't fish, I don't have any skill because I use electronics. Let's go. I'll turn my sonar off. Don't care. Or I'll give it to you and I'll fish without it. Put your money where your mouth is. They talk about let's start a tour with no electronics. That'd be interesting. No, it'd be 8 hours of watching people cast. Bill Dancer guys, Rick Klon, they used every bit of information they could get to catch a fish. Because I guarantee you right now,
more information now.
Well, that's why there's a rule why you can't fly over the lakes, because only certain guys like Roland Martin and them guys could afford it. So, and trust me, from altitude, you can see things in a lake, whether it's down or not, that you cannot see from the ground. And my other thing is, this is how I know most guys' electronics are in trouble. I know how to read a topographic map. I learned to read one as a Cub Scout. The Army trained me. I can actually drop artillery in the back pocket with one. All I need is a 1 over 50,000 and a protractor, and I can drop it to the grid and land a 155 right on your head. So I can read a topo map. I guarantee you, take us older guys out that grew up reading lake maps. Take 100 fishermen at random from 20 to 40, throw them in a room, throw them out in front of them. Most of them couldn't tell you anything. Electronics or not. They can't read a map. I know how to triangulate. Why would I waste all that time triangulating when I've got a GPS unit to do it for me? If you watch me, and when I get some videos up this year, if you watch me though, the second I catch a fish, you'll see my head come up and I'll start looking around. And that's a habit from not having electronics. Okay, I caught him here. There's a great big lightning scarred oak tree. There's the water tower. And I'll turn around and look behind me and get that third point so I can triangulate so I can find that spot. It's just a habit. But how most of these guys running electronics down, I think they think it's a superpower. I just go out of the lake, I push the on button and it says fish here. No, it doesn't work like that. If it did, I wouldn't be here now. Well, it's not fishing. I'd rather catch. I don't know about you. I'd rather catch. I spent a lot of my life fishing. Sitting on a bank waiting for a catfish. Nothing wrong with it. Don't get me wrong. Not knocking any of it. But don't hate on me because I got 8 hours in one day that I want, and what I want to do is catch. I'm only going to be on this earth for maybe another 2 decades, 3 if I'm lucky. Why am I going to waste time when I can use technology to make me that much more efficient? You know how long it take? Lake of the Ozarks is 44,000 acres. You know how long it take you to fish 44,000 acres? Even if you fish 7 days a week.
All your life?
Pretty much. I've been going to Kentucky for 10 years. I guarantee you I haven't seen a third of that. And I make long ass. I'm not afraid to pull in a marine and say, put some gas in it. I got to go home. I haven't even begun to see a third of what Kentucky offers. So Google Earth gives me the advantage to see a lake from an vantage point and down that you never had before. Because let's be honest, paper maps back then were channel markers and fishing. Yep, I do that too. I want to know how that creek runs. I want to see where that bend is, where it runs up against a bluff wall or something. It's funny how a lot of that old school stuff goes right along with the electronics. All I'm doing is using it to confirm what my skills and instincts are already telling. I just don't have to guess it.
Even though I'm younger than both y'all, and I don't use electronics, so I still do the old school stuff. Birds in the Carolina rig.
Yeah. Hey, if nothing else is working, get the Carolina rig out. You can cover a lot of water with that thing. and it'll tell
Lay
you where you're
downs.
at. Mm-hmm.
Flip up into a lay down.
Well, and the trick is electronics are not, like I said, electronics are just confirming what my skills and instincts are already telling you. If you go out on a lake and don't know how to use your electronics and you think you're going to ride around and wait till you spot fish, you might. 5-10% of the time, you might. Most of the time, you're not. You're still looking for the same things you were looking for before, but now you don't have to guess. You don't have to waste 30 minutes going, is that a rock? Is that a shell bed? You can figure it out like that.
Oh,
Well, that
like I
lets you
said,
know.
it won't catch the fish for you, but it
No.
will tell you they're there.
Yeah. Well, and I keep my map reading skills and stuff up because it's an electronic.
It'll fail.
It'll fail. I guarantee it. Yeah. Water will get in there. It will shut off when you least expect it. You know, if it's mechanical or electronic, it's going to fail. You know, battery's going to die because batteries. Yep, contour lines. I do the same thing. That's one thing I like about my Ultrex, that follow contour, boy, that makes life so much easier. Because now I can hit follow contour. It'll stay on that contour line all the way until I tell it to stop. But now I can focus on fishing instead of fighting the trolling motor and the wind and the waves. And
Well, I don't. Like I said, I don't use electronics because when I kayak fish, I just don't.
right.
There are guys that have them on kayaks. I just don't
Mhm.
see the need for them where I live. I don't have a.
Well,
I don't have big bass factories here, and I don't solely. I mean, I like to bass fish, but I don't solely bass fish. I spend a lot of time doing other sorts of fishing.
yeah. Well, it depends on where I'm at. Now, like Clinton, I might use my electronics. Now, if it's late April, early May, mid May, and the spawn's on, I don't, half the time I won't even turn them on. Because I know how deep the backs of those creeks are. That's where I'm going to be anyway. It's all shallow water. There's really no need to have it on unless I'm out looking for ledges or I'm looking for a bridge that people don't realize is there. You know, I've got a pic. I had posted a picture a year or two ago of a bridge. I know where to go. A bridge abutment is, and it's funny how many guys drive by and after 5 gets there. But that's not something you're going to find unless you. I mean, to find stuff like that used to take 20, 30 years, and fishing constantly. Now, like if I go to the state park lake, Walnut Point, where I like to go, it's reasonably deep. It's got a couple of points. It's not big, 52 acres. Most of it's wood cover. I mean, I know what I'm doing there. I'm getting the crankbait and the jig out. On a really bad day, I might pull the drop shot out or a wacky one. You know, but most time down here, even middle of summer, I'm going to run up and down the bank, throwing at wood and a little off the where the point comes out, you know, with a jig and a crankbait. So it all depends on what you're fishing. Now you go to Kentucky in the summer, middle of June, you're ledge fishing. You're not finding some of those ledges. You'll find them on a map, but you're not going to nail and pop perfectly without being able to see them underwater. And depending on the day and the wind, they're going to set up a little bit every time. And some of them ledges are only 8 foot deep, so you're technically fishing shallow water, but you're offshore. But some of those ledges, there's a couple I fish, you're not going to find them without it. You'll drive right by it because it's such a subtle change. You know, everybody talks about, well, use a flasher. Well, you know, flashers are great if you know how to use one. But you still couldn't tell the difference between is that brush or is it grass? You know, now I know. You know, technology is technology. It's not going away. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to happen. If there was
it's on my list. It's on my list of biggest change, but it's not the biggest thing to me that has changed fishing. I mean, because electronics came around. Back in the '90s, we had them.
Yeah.
They started using, and I think even in the '80s, the depth finders and stuff. But
late '80s, early '90s, then you started getting the liquid crystal displays.
Now, has there been a lot of change to electronics? Absolute.
Oh yeah.
Forward-facing sonar is leagues, universes away from those old depth finders back in the '90s. Like you said, is that a fish or a log or a bait?
I had that 2D grayscale on my twin troller, and that thing couldn't tell the difference between a fish and a turtle fur. You know,
But to me, I tell you, and maybe it's because I'm biased because I'm kind of part of that world as well. The biggest change to this is the availability of information.
bingo. Good night, Tim. Thanks for hanging out, bud. Glad you were
So,
here.
not Sam, appreciate it, bud. So, but like information's at your fingertips, and not only that, but the way the information now is at your fingertips
Well,
has
you can dream
surpassed.
right.
Yeah, but not only is it connected, it has surpassed the old guys. Like before our generation, when you think of bass fishing, you think Bill Dance, Jimmy Houston, Hank Parker.
Brooklyn. Uh,
Yeah,
he's one of my favorites. He's from Nixon, Missouri. The General, Larry Nixon. You
right.
know,
And,
Hank
and when
Parker,
you think of
David
the
Fritz.
information available of this, then later on you have like Mike Iaconelli going Ike. He did those shows, his deal with Discovery. But you ask a guy 20 years younger than us, they think of four kids from Texas who have never professionally bass fished in their life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they have all, and when they came around and they started doing this, all the pros were laughing at them. Kids in Texas
Yeah.
and bass fishing. Yeah. And now you drive a boat around with their name on it.
Yeah.
You know?
And we'll find out if they've got staying power or not.
Well,
But
they're the fastest growing brand in America. So, yeah, I mean, I think at this point we have to say they've got staying power. I mean,
to a point,
they've been
we'll
around
see.
10 years now.
When they've been around as long as Zoom and Berkeley, we'll talk.
Oh, not on their baits, but yeah.
But well, and it is the availability of information is just astronomical. You can drown in information to the point where it actually hurts you. You know, when I'm going to, I've been studying Ozarks since February. When I'm going to a lake, what I want to know is water depth. I want to know your generation schedule, if it's got a dam up and you're pulling water, because that's when ledge fishing in Kentucky gets hot. When they're pulling water, you better be on them ledges. If they're not pulling water, you're throwing wiffle balls. You can sit there all day until they start drawing water and create current. But I want to know what the water temperature is, what the water clarity is. I could care less what the hot bait is. Now, I know fishing, that's why I've been learning to skip. Fishing Ozark, them docks are going to play. I know there's going to be about 3,000 guys and gals fishing this big bass batch. A lot of boats, a lot of people.
Oh, I don't think they're. Don't get me wrong. I don't think this is about Lucky Strike or Zoom or Z-Man or anybody else either. I don't think there's anything magic about anything they make. I don't think there's anything magic. They all make one. Now I will give credit because he came out with it. There is something magic about that design. There's something a little magic about that design. So since he invented it in 1996, I will say yes. Gary Yamamoto made something that was magic.
You know? With a big pen.
With a big pen, he made some magic. But
and they laughed at him.
So I get that. But other than that, a stick bait's a stick bait, a crankbait's a crankbait.
Yep.
A trick worm's a trick worm, whatever. But what I will say is they are magic at seeing the next wave coming. They were magic at knowing where this industry was going.
Yeah. Well, that's like right now, the electronics companies are pretty much running everything.
Right.
You know, and I subscribe to the school. If you've got the money, can afford it, you want it, go ahead and buy it. If you don't got the money, don't have the money, but you want it, figure out how to get it. That's just the way everything in life is. I mean, I didn't always have money. And when I didn't,
and I think there's also some changes, like the popularity of kayak fishing that brought it to a whole different set of the masses.
Yeah, but I'm starting to see a lot of things that you find on bass boats, on kayaks. I mean, it's not going to be long for,
Right.
they've got trolling motors already, So, I take it with a grain of salt. But
I mean, there are some expensive
I think the
kayaks out
biggest
there,
change
but
is satellite, being able to look at satellite pictures of a lake from overhead and go back in time and see that lake at different water levels. See it. One of the spots focusing on in Ozarks in the area I want to fish. There's a dock there. Off this point, there's a bluff wall. The main river channel runs right up against that bluff wall. Bluff wall ends on a point. There's shallow water with some sand and gravel. 5 years ago, there was not a dock there. Now there's a dock. So there's a change. That's something you'd never know if you didn't look at that satellite pic and be able to go back. And the availability of actually good information. Now, not everything on YouTube is good information. Bass fishing is plagued with generalities and myths that have somehow become fact. George Cochran started that whole, they see the red hook and think it's blood crap. No, red happens to be a spectrum that bass see very well, which is why red baits in certain times of year work so well, because they see it. It's one of the color spectrums. There's no scientific proof to back up they think it's blood or anything else. How bass can think that?
yeah, they see in green and red.
Yeah, chartreuse, greens, red, and some blues depending on the water clarity and depth. Now, once you're at 20 feet or more, it really doesn't matter. At 20 feet, everything's pretty much gray, which is why black and stuff works so well deep. Because it's just
they just see shadow after that.
Yeah.
At a certain depth,
and
they
that's
just
why
see
low light conditions you want to fix stuff out of bait because they don't have time to look at it. But it's like the old rhyme. My dad taught me. Well, wind from the east, fish bite the least. Wind from the west, they bite the best. Wind from the south, close bait in their mouth. Wind from the north, don't go for it. There is a grain of truth in that. Think about it. South and west winds bring what? Warm fronts, warming trends. Well, of course they're going to bite better. Water's warming, the air's warming. Their biology's screaming, go mate, So fishing is usually better on those days, unless it's a high bluebird sky day. It's just east, west, east, north, and east winds tend to bring what? Cold fronts, rain, storms. Well, like any animal, bass don't, what do deer do when storms are rolling? They go eat and then they go bed down until the storm passes. Bass do the same thing, just like humans.
Yeah,
we're the only dummies that go out in the rain on purpose. Yeah.
I tell people, they ask me, what do you throw in this conditions or this conditions and water conditions? And I said, look, you throw whatever they're after. You just got to figure that out. You throw whatever they're after. I don't know what that is. There is only one type of water condition I can tell you exactly what to throw. And they're like, what's that? Cold, muddy water. I can tell in very cold and very muddy water, I can tell you exactly what to throw. Like, what are you throwing that? You throw your shit in the truck and go to the house and come back another day. That's what you throw.
See, in the Omaha River, one of the big things we threw a lot was a guy in the club made, and they were a 6-inch motor oil worm with an orange fire tail. And, everybody had them because they worked. You had to throw a lot of blacks, blues, chartreuses in that water because it was tannic. I mean, it looked like tea in some places, But, yeah, I think that's the biggest change. It's not electronics, it's information and the ability to correlate all that information and use it. Because 30 years ago, if I'm catching them in 8 feet of water, 50 feet offshore on a hump, I'm not telling you that. Yeah, I caught them over there. I'm not telling you how I'm doing. Now, there are no.
Now the guys are. Now, yeah, there are not. And now there are guys who are sponsored by a company. You press a button on your hat, it tells you the water depth, the temperature, the area of the lake they caught it at, the size of the fish. I
don't use any of those apps. I am not helping my competition. You got to get out there and sweat and get wet and be miserable and figure it out on your own. And that's electronics.
I have been completely honest ever since I started doing this. Like, oh, you sell out in a heartbeat. I don't have competition. I'm not a professional bass angler. If somebody is willing to pay me to go fishing instead of punching the clock for somebody else all day, where do I?
And I'm fortunate with where I'm at pay wise. I don't need the income from fishing to make to live. So I'm kind of in a really nice position. It costs me quite a bit, but you know, and the thing is, I'm gonna go out there and I know what I'm gonna throw most of the time. I got 3 or 4 colors: bluegill, shad, a couple of dark colors for muddy water, and I got that one odd color for just when I, screw it, I'm throwing a pink bubblegum worm, because it works occasionally. Red
Yeah, it does.
methylate, chartreuse,
I don't know what it is about that, like trout, bubblegum
yeah,
pink, and trout just
yeah.
eat it up. I don't
And
know
every now
what
and
they
then,
see it as,
the
or
right day and weather, I can take a red methylate worm or a pink bubblegum or a goofy looking glow in the dark chartreuse thing and go throw it and catch bass all day long.
oh, that reminds me. I got a theory on a bait. Somebody did the research. I read an article on it about bass eating crawfish, crawdad,
Yeah,
crayfish, whatever it is you call it in your area of the world, right? And they said that they take a crawfish and threw it out and it would get ate, and so much percentage of the crawfish got eaten. But then they take the crawfish, rip their claws off, throw it back out, and like 20% more of the clawless crawfish would be eaten. So like the
yeah,
bass know to target a defenseless crawfish.
yeah,
And I always, you think about it, when you throw a crawl and you get a claw ripped off or something, you get another bait, you put another bait on.
right.
So I always wondered, like, well, maybe I should just throw it back out there. But then somebody goes, "What do you think a Ned rig is?" Son of
Yeah,
a,
that's it. Imagine it's like a little
it's a
fish,
clawless
like a
crayfish.
minnow, or that, or a little minnow eating on the bottom, or like how a bluegill eats with tail up, sideways. You know, they don't go, oh, that's a crawfish, that's a bluegill. They go, that's dinner.
Right.
I can get to it. Like here, early spring, our crawfish here are olive with some blue tinge to them. You want to be throwing a black and blue with an Okeechobee on. How do I know that? I'll go down the bank, kick rocks till I find some. Later in the year, they're more brown. You know, but I can promise you, if you're fishing Midwest, Central Illinois, if you're throwing a green pumpkin jig with an Okeechobee craw on the back, or a black and blue with an Okeechobee craw on the back, most of the year you're gonna catch it. Why? Because that's what the
Everybody
forage.
tells me in Florida, June bug. Really, that's the
Yeah,
color, like
yeah.
Okeechobee June bug.
Southeast Georgia, Florida, parts of southern Alabama, for whatever reason, June bug works like magic. Around here, the other color that works really well is red shad. Don't get it, but mimic your local forage as best you can. At least the color schemes.
I
We got pumpkin
use
seeds, we got red ears. Some of them have a little purple in them. Bass really don't care. They don't discern that much.
I don't I honestly I don't think color matters as much as profile.
Right. Well, and I always look at it as, like I said earlier, where's the fat people sit at a buffet closest to the food? Now, if we're sitting in a building and we're at work and we're sitting in the building, they got pizza in the warehouse, but I got to walk 500 yards to get that piece of pizza. I'm probably not going to get it. Now, you bring that piece of pizza and drop it on my lap, I'm going to eat it. And that's your job as a bass fisherman, is try to put that piece of pizza right in his lap.
Right.
Make that reaction bite. That's the other thing we're looking for most times, is a reaction bite. I don't want him looking at that lure going, is that a fish or not? I don't want him thinking about it. I want him to just grab it.
Right. Right. Yeah, I
So,
mean, if you think about it, like we were talking about a while ago from a big pen, but to me, there probably hasn't been a better bass lure ever made than stick bait
yeah.
bass catching lure.
Yeah, for catching numbers. I'll put it up
There,
against a jig for big fish.
well, yeah,
More money's been made on a jig in tournaments with big fish than will ever be made on a stick bait. But yeah,
but
you want numbers, and stick bait's the way to go. You want bigger fish to weigh, jig.
so
Plus, I can fish that in 25 feet of water. You can fish a stick bait out there, but you're gonna be waiting a while.
you're gonna have to be very patient.
Yeah, well, so that's my reason. Jig's my favorite. On average, you get less bites but bigger fish on a jig. I can fish it just like a spinnerbait, 0 to 25 feet. Doesn't matter what the weather conditions are, what the water conditions are. I can throw a jig all year long. It's one of the very few baits that is not controlled by temperature and depth, which is why there's always one right on. You know?
But there ain't nothing that swims like that.
No.
There ain't nothing that does it. It swims like this.
It looks like it's hurt. Or it looks like it's crawling along. Like I said, it just looks like an easy, simple meal to get. Because that's as far as their thinking process goes. I mean, how many bass have you ever seen on a lake got another fish stuck in its throat and try to swallow something good? You know, I see that crap every year. Well, what happened was that crappie or whatever it was swam up just right, and that big bass went. Whoop. You look like
more than he could chew.
Yeah, he couldn't swallow him all the way because he wasn't big enough. You know, bass can swallow something half their body. So, but yeah, most of it's about making it look okay. Is it about the size of what they're normally eating? Yeah. But making it look like an easy meal. One of my experience with jig was at the Pay Lake I talked about earlier. I was standing at a spot on the shore and there was a flat piece of stone there, rock, piece of concrete, square, and it was about that. The top of it was about that deep under the water, and it was clear enough I could see it. And I put my black and blue jig with that crawler and just let it sit. And that water's making it wave, and the skirt's waving, and the claws are going. And sure enough, something just come up and just sucked it right off that rock. Why? It was an easy meal. And that's what they want. They want it simple. All right, hey, look, I'm a 7-pound bass. I'm not running halfway across the lake to chase down a crankbait. I ain't doing it.
Right.
Yeah. You about hit me in the head with it, I might grab it. And I think that's where we get overly focused on lures and techniques. And the truth is, you can catch bass on a beer tab with a red ribbon attached to it. Yeah. I pulled the red ribbon trick. I put the red ribbon on the hook. You can do it.
I think finding them's a lot more important than
exactly, and that's where electronics play.
What you're throwing.
And you can't just rely on electronics. Like I said, I'm doing map study now, Google Earth. I've got my Fish Smart app on my phone. This is why I love because I got my Fish Smart app. I've got the map of Ozarks. I got waypoints marked already. I'm not even on the lake. When I go get my boat and fire up my units, my phone's paired to my Humminbird. It'll put them waypoints right on my map. You know, and these are just general areas. It's stuff you can find on the top of the map to give me a starting point. Because once I get there, now I'm looking for a spot within a spot. Because we're fishing for big fish. So I'm looking for that one little piece, that one little part of the puzzle that everybody else is overlooking. Thicker and deeper. Thicker cover, deeper water. You know, or that one spot that this is his home and that's why. Because trust me, if there's a 6 or a 7 pounder sitting there, there's no 2 and 3s hanging around.
Right.
You know, if you're catching nothing but small fish, ain't no big ones around.
They'll get eaten.
Yeah, because, well, I told a buddy that a couple of years back. He was talking about, oh, I catch the 12 inches. I figure I'll run into a big one. No, if you're catching nothing but 12, 15-inch fish, there ain't no big ones around. Because if they were, those 12 to 15 inches would be gone. Because
right.
when you're a 15-inch bass and a 4-pounder moves into here, you are now on the menu.
Yeah.
Because bass got the same mentality shark does. If I can swallow it, I'm eating.
Pretty much.
So, well, dude, it's been fun.
Yeah. I was just gonna say it's time to wrap it up. Anything you want to bring up before we go?
No. I'm gonna try to get some content on YouTube this year. Hope some folks check me out and have fun doing it.
All right. What's your channel name?
AWildmanfishing.
All right, I'll check it out. All right. Everybody that's left, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you next week. And next week, I will have a different kind of guest on. I have a hunter, trapper, and angler from the PA area. The Instagram's PA Woods and Water. And we'll see you next week. Be sure and tune in. All right.